All right, now we want to take some questions from the audience. We're on. This is being recorded and broadcast on Tiger TV, so we want to get your question for the benefit of those people who are watching this on television. So if you'll raise your hand, Heather Herman will hand you the microphone so you can pose your question to the senators.
Uh-oh. I grew up with John in Crowley, and he had 14 years in the House. He was going to be Speaker of the House. We just knew it. The Senate race comes open. He invited 10 of us to the Lafayette Hilton, ostensibly to ask our opinion as to whether he had to give up the seat to run for the Senate. Henson Moore, the pendulum swings back and forth. The Republicans, it was inevitable Henson Moore was going to win this race.
Reagan was president.
All 10 of us, to a man, told him he was crazy. Don't give up the seat in the House. I'll never forget, he looks at us, he said, "Gentlemen, I want to thank you for agreeing with my decision to run for the Senate." Not a one of us said that. And of course, history proved that he was right. But what gave you the confidence at that time to roll the dice? Was it because the Senate was so much a bigger deal than the House, or you felt you could win? Or?
You know, it's an interesting question, and it wasn't quite that bad. A couple of them said you ought to think about running. Raymond went and paid all his debts off because he thought I was definitely going to lose. He wasn't going to have a job. Almost. I was in the House, and we were in the majority in the House. And you all were in the Senate, and we're in the minority. So I was willing to give up being in the majority, like I just was talking about how important it was to be in the majority in the House, to give that up to go be in the Senate to be in the minority. Number one, I knew that even if you were in the minority in the Senate, you still had the ability to do some things that were very, very important, as Bennett had proven already as a member of the minority. Fortunately, when I did run, we gained 7 Democratic seats that year. Almost all of us were from the House that all ran to be in the minority in the Senate. Harry Reid ran that year, Tom Daschle ran that year, Barbara Mikulski won that year, I won that year. Anyway, it was about 7 of us that won, and we flipped the Senate back to the majority for the Democrats, and so we were back in the majority. I had been in the House for 14 years and felt like I really loved the 7th Congressional District, which was the Texas border, Lake Charles, Crowley, Lafayette. It was a perfect district for me, and I was very happy in it. It was just a very homogeneous district, and it worked very well. But I just wanted the opportunity to move around the state. I mean, it was such a great opportunity to represent different parts of the state, different cultures, different accents, and up in Bennett's area up in the north was so different from the southern part of the state, and then you had the metropolitan area of Baton Rouge and New Orleans. It was just, I thought it was just an exciting opportunity to represent the entire state as opposed to just one part of the state. And you know, if you don't take a chance, you'll never get anything done. So we just rolled the dice and got lucky and enjoyed it.
Do you think that that civility is decreased because relatively unknown congressmen or even senators can make a name for themselves in the news media nowadays by acting outrageous or just not being civil?
You know, President Obama just spoke to that the other day. He said, you know, one of the problems is you got these 24-hour news cycles, and if somebody says something sensible, it doesn't make news. Where if somebody says something that's, you know, off the charts, or you're a liar, or whatever, it makes news. I mean, the Joe Wilson thing was played day after day after day, and unfortunately, that is what the press tends to look for too much. I don't know how to change that, but that is very true.
And Ben is exactly right on that. I mean, Joe Wilson, who called the president a liar, running for re-election now, has raised over $7 million in about 2.5, 3 weeks because of his outlandish statement of calling the president a liar. I mean, you can disagree with the president, but you ought to have enough respect for the office and for the institution that you're sitting in to not do something like that. But he raised over $7 million. And then there was a Democrat congressman from Florida who had the charts on the floor after that, talked about the Republican solution for health care. One of the charts was die early. certainly would reduce the cost of health care, but not something that I would recommend. But he did that, and it was really sort of outlandish, and compared some of them to, I guess he really came sort of about, the Nazi word was used by him. And yeah, genocide, he called it genocide. So that was an extreme in the opposite direction. And both those fellows now have been sort of elevated because of this 24-hour news cycle. I mean, Keith Olbermann had the guy from Florida praising him and defending him. Sean Hannity had the Wilson guy on and talking about what a great job he did. And people started feeding on that and hearing that. And all of a sudden, if you want to get news, be outlandish. And really the solutions are not from the people who are outlandish, but from the people who are sort of in the quiet middle, which I think where most Americans are. And one of the reasons why you see a lot more people registering as independents, quite frankly, more and more in Louisiana and really around the nation. And because, you know, they sort of elect people in public office to go off and make government work. I mean, we're electing grown-ups, and they're supposed to make government work, not just blame each other for failure. And what you see more and more is grown-ups in Washington who are just blaming each other for failure rather than working together for success. And you can always fight over who did it, but at least you'd be arguing about an accomplishment and not fighting over who caused failure. But I mean, this 24-hour that Bennett spoke about is why the more outlandish you are, the more attention you're going to get. But you know, bad news and bad publicity, I don't think is good.